Call the October 24th Finance Committee meeting to order. Bill, do you have the roll? First item is approval of the minutes.
Second.
I do have a comment for the minutes of the 10th. Last paragraph, the intent of my motion was to fully fund the public safety capital reserves in future years out of this. Just to make that clear, it's not to help fund them. The help fund was a 19 item. For subsequent years, was to fully fund those items.
Okay, we can ask an additional comment there to clarify that.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Let's go to budget one, consideration of the 19 tax income and financing. Let's, yes, sir.
Can I say something?
Please do.
I'll move approval of the budget as recommended by staff.
Which budget? There's two of
This
them.
was handed out today, which I assume is the exact same thing.
But there's two items for consideration.
Capital,
One is the capital that's
Capital.
essentially based on levy or
Capital.
funding. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
yep,
And then there's TIF capital as
Yep.
well. I think we need to consider them separately.
I just said capital.
All items except for what is TIF funded is what's up.
Yep. That
Up for
column
discussion.
called TIF, yep.
So I'm not understanding, are you saying that where staff put yes or no in, that we would
Yep.
accept those?
Yep. If you get it out so that it,
Starting point.
starting point.
So that
Browse here.
totals 3491. Is that what you're saying?
Over $3,491,000.
Unless you change it, I haven't looked at it. I looked at the sheet that came out last week or the week before, and if it's that number,
That's at the bottom of the third page.
So Mike, I have a question. So, there's some interest in finding about $30,000 for some capital items. Is it possible to postpone the electronic poll books until the spring of 2020? So do that in our next capital budget? So they'd have the spring election to get familiar with them going into the 2020 November or fall elections?
I think that's possible. It's not a requirement that we need to adopt them or adopt them at any certain time. I think the hope was to get them in
Right.
19, to have the additional time to get used to them before the 2020 fall election.
Yeah.
But I think that's a possibility.
Okay. Okay, I would, can we take that off? I'd like to remove that item and free up 30,000 for the full council meeting for motions from other members. Okay.
I had a long conversation with Lori about that very same thing.
They're a great idea. I talked to
Oh,
the
yeah.
Dane County clerk and he's all in favor because it will help to expedite the lines. And that's really what's important for a presidential election is to keep the lines to a minimum so that people don't turn away. So I like the idea. There are some other priorities that we need for next year, so.
Such as what?
There are some RRBFs under Public Works Other, Century Avenue and Park Street. No, is it High Road, Dan?
High Road and North Side.
North Side, yeah. So Century Avenue, Valley Ridge, and High Road and North Side.
That's 45 grand.
Well,
So if you want to pick
is
two of
Sean
those-
here? Are they 15,000 now?
For a set, and it depends a little bit on the wiring.
Yeah. So if we just do
The
two?
microphone.
So it's just two, Dan, that you're looking for, or all three? Those two.
I think with purchase and installation and wiring, that's our planning figure.
Okay.
I
And if we
don't know
did
that
two,
they
it'd be
cost.
around 30,000?
I'm sorry? Oh, that's a set.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it might not be quite 15 grand, but that's our planning figure.
But that's, now Sean, this is item number 5. I thought the pair was for 15,000. So how could it be 30,000 just for one?
Maybe I'm reading the wrong thing. I was reading numbers 8, 9, and 10 on
Right.
Public Works Other.
Oh, okay,
Right, and it might be just 8 and 10 that we
Okay,
would,
okay, all right.
we would expedite.
Okay.
Would be for a total of 30.
Yeah, right. 2 locations,
Right.
sorry, yeah.
Which two did you say, Joanna?
8 and 10,
8.
8 and 10?
right? Is that right, Dane? 8 and 10?
We got right in.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
8 and
that's-
10.
Howard moved approval of what staff had recommended, and then asked about,
Just a waste of time.
I don't know if there's been a motion yet. We voted to take the electronic vote out 19.
And Matt had his hand up too, so maybe he wants to add some information.
Before we do that, did anyone second Howard's initial motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You might want to bring up the Conservancy lands.
Under the Conservancy lands projects, we've talked internally as staff and with Susan about the importance of funding number 2 and switching, saying no to number 6 and yes to number 2. They're the same dollar amount.
Say that again?
We'll switch those two.
Switching numbers 2 and 6 under Conservancy lands.
With the condition that number 6 comes back for funding definitely in 2019, so that we don't fall behind on what we've been doing on restoration
2020.
at 2020. Because if we don't keep up with it, we're going to start losing what we've invested already.
So Matt, when was the last time we prepared the master plan for the Feather Branch?
Long time ago.
It's in excess of 20 years. I believe, Susan, do you remember the exact, 98?
Yeah, it
98.
was way
Thanks,
before
Mike.
I ever got on CLC.
Thank you.
That was truly needed.
And help me understand the difference between the Conservancy master plan and the master plan for CLC. Why do we need a specific just the Conservancy when we have master plan for CLC?
The Conservancy Lands Master Plan, one of its main recommendations was developing master plans for specific sites. The Conservancy Lands Master Plan looks overall, but it doesn't dive into the detail level in each specific site that is important for looking at, restoration decisions and land management decisions in those specific units of management.
When was the last time the CLC master plan was done?
Last year.
So basically, what you're saying is from a PEC perspective, the CLC plan isn't worth anything.
No, that's not what he's saying.
It sets goals overall for Conservancy lands, but it doesn't dive to the level of detail in each land management unit that we need to move forward.
So how many other unique parcels of the CLC are gonna come up for master plan spending? See my point here? We have an umbrella, and then you wanna keep going, you wanna keep drilling into this stuff. Just seems to me that
We're,
this all should be done at the higher level, and what I hear is that we spend a lot of money on the higher level that doesn't help us at the lower level.
but each lower level is very uniquely different. In the main conservancy, there is nothing else like it in the whole city.
Not disputing that. What I'm saying is that we just seem to have a distorted view of what we're spending for. I would have expected that the CLC master plan would be able to drill into PVC and other unique areas. And what I'm hearing is that we didn't get what we should have, may possibly have expected. I
think
certainly
we-
would have expected a PBC detailed plan as part of the CLC plan.
I understand the point that you're making, Mark. The difference here is we had a $20,000 budget for the Conservancy Lands plan. And if we'd have wrote in the specifications or the request for proposal to go that level of detail, I mean, we didn't include that in that RFP or that scope of work. And I understand what you're saying, and maybe that's what we have to do in the future to get more of what we need from that overall plan.
So what we're saying is that the PBC plan is worth 2.5 times the CLC plan. Again, I'm trying to look at the scale here of what we're getting, and okay. Never mind.
And Mark, to kind of point out what, if you take a look at Conservancy Lands number 9 priority, bottom is a Hidden Oaks master plan. That's one of the detailed plans that he's talking about. That drills down into the nitty-gritty of high-level master plan. And I imagine if I,
I'm questioning
If
the
you-
need
if-
of having these sub-plans when we have an overall direction.
The
to
overall
me-
the
direction
overall
does,
direction says we're gonna shovel snow, but it doesn't say that it's only so deep and on this yard. And so, I mean, it doesn't take you down to the point where you could do something with some contracts.
and each of these are
do it.
ecologically very, very different, and the plans have to be different, and they need to be detailed.
Imagine if you ask Matt, he could probably list another half dozen of these master plans. over
I
a
understand
couple of
that,
years
I'm just
that you're gonna see.
questioning why we need to get so detailed.
Well,
And-
the end,
and
the end
Why,
result,
why isn't just a generic conservancy plan sufficient for the sub-areas?
We do park and open space planning. We do that plan every 5 years to make us eligible for DNR funding, but it doesn't go into detail level at each park site. It may talk about some improvement projects and things to put into a 5-year capital plan, but unless you specify in that scope of services that you want a detailed site plan for a park renovation, it doesn't do that. Like when we go and build Taylor Park, the last park and open space plan didn't have detailed plans for Taylor Park in the last park and open space plan.
But Mark does have an excellent point. Is it possible
No.
that, while you're building that bigger plan, you could have more details for these smaller areas as well? A lot of them, we spend the money, they sit on the shelf.
I understand, and you could argue that the 1998 plan, what level of implementation the 98 plan had, and I think that comes from a commitment level here of, if we're gonna create plans, are we gonna follow them? And
Oh, let me tell you that, if you guys remember Penny walking around with that plan and a dog-eared, it was well used. That's the one that was approved.
Yep.
Called the North Mendota Conservancy Plan at that time in 1998. And it was her Bible. She lived by that and brought that to every meeting that we had.
I mean, I think one of the
So
big,
So let's follow that question. Is everything on that master plan completed?
Quite a bit.
Okay, well, it seems to me that before you start a new plan, you ought to just finish the old plan.
I think the thing that we're looking for most in a master plan for the Pheasant Branch Conservancy right now is, what are the restoration priorities? What areas, because we can't go in and eradicate buckthorn from 400 acres. So what are those controlled sites, similar to the Bach Forest and what was done there? What are those next highest priority areas that we want to enter into restoration efforts? And what is the prioritization from that? And I think that delves into a level of detail in working with the citizenry and the Friends in establishing those goals and plans moving forward.
And the current master plan for CLC, I think Was this the first time that we ever looked into citizen input?
Yeah.
And that was a major part of it.
And you have an existing plan that's not complete. Before you start a new plan,
Mark,
how to finish the old one.
what was proposed back in 1998 also is probably no longer relevant.
Have anybody checked to see whether that's not relevant? Has anybody decided, if you guys had a meeting that says, here's what our plan was, this is what we've got accomplished, this is what's left, is what's left still relevant? Has anybody done that?
It's not relevant because we've added a lot more new land
No,
since 1998.
he's talking about the 1998 Pheasant Branch Conservancy Plan.
Okay. We've changed a lot even there.
Ten words or less. EDC Southeast Trail.
So the boardwalk on the Southeast Trail has been a point of contention with a lot of slips, trips, and falls. It would be replacing the wood decking on the steel frame boardwalk and then installing the fiberglass strips that were tested on the Marina Drive boardwalk last year with good success in limiting some of those slip, trips, and falls. So it's new decking on the boardwalk plus the installation of those fiberglass safety strips.
I'm just struggling with the term Southeast Trail.
So the trail,
By Wood Creek.
yeah,
Oh.
as you enter off of Century Avenue heading north, the trail that heads to the east from the main trail all the way to the bridge, Southeast
Bridge
Trail.
of the boardwalk.
I was just trying to understand which trail you're talking about. 'cause
One
you have
behind
Quite a lot of them.
Yep.
BS and all back in there.
No, because my motion was to approve this
As is. Okay.
just for the capital.
So
So
I
the
just
best
want
note yet-
to keep us all on the same page. So there was a request to defer the poll books and replace it with two crossing walk beacons. So let's do it this way. Is there a motion to accept that change?
I'll move that change.
To replace the poll books with what? You mumbled.
Two are our
FB.
FBs, I want to say
Flashing beacon.
BS,
Okay.
yeah.
Industrial-
Number 8 and 10 on the Public Works other. And then ensure that, I mean, we would revisit that for 2020, but so we'd have them for the spring elections.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
No, because I want to,
I'll second it. Is there any discussion on that? All right, hearing none. This is just a swap of those two. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye
Swap.
opposed, motion carries. So you had a request to do the CLC restoration for the update. Is there a motion for that?
okay, there's one other item. Matt, which trail did you want included? Or did it not even make it on this list?
The trail issue is separate. It's listed under the pedestrian and bicycle projects on the back side of the first page.
Okay, that's why I'm having trouble finding it.
H2,
Page two.
after library.
I'm sorry, which page?
It's page 5 in the
Sorry,
packet, page 2 of
five
6.
Oh, okay.
is page 2 of 6.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the North Fork, the trail from the North Fork Standard Imaging to Hitters definitely needs to be replaced. And we need to start thinking of these trails as not just recreation, but transportation And Matt, correct me, this is where the bad accident occurred, right?
We discussed that this morning at our staff meeting. There was a reported accident here with some pretty serious injuries, but as far as anyone's aware, it's the only accident resulting in injuries that's ever been reported to the city at that location.
But it was an accident, at least blamed on the condition of the trail.
What's happened here is there's some stormwater pipes that are private under the trail that were put in prior to our current stormwater regulations. So there aren't maintenance agreements for the pipes, and the pipes are a little bit in limbo in terms of who's responsible for them. And I think, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but because there isn't a maintenance agreement and they're under a city improvement such as the trail, they're technically our responsibility. Okay. The issue is.
They are popping up. I mean, they look like feel like a speed bump when you're going over
So
them.
you've been over there?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And the injury was multiple broken bones, concussion, ended up, jaw was broken with metal plates and jaw wired together for a couple of weeks. So fairly significant injuries.
And this section of trail
Nice.
was our number one request last year for funding, wasn't funded. It remains the number one request and the only project for trail development or for trail maintenance that we were requesting funding for in this budget process. And we have 14 miles of trail. It's a total investment in today's dollars of just over $6 million. If you divided that out over a 30-year expected lifespan, if we were to be looking at this proactively and how we replace and continue to budget for maintaining that infrastructure, we'd be around $230,000 a year to support that life cost of that amenity.
Yeah, and we haven't done it if we don't do this, this would be the second year we haven't done it.
Was this trail impacted by storm flooding at all?
There was water over the trail in this area. There's no identified damage from the flooding to this section of trail.
I would argue that the pipes were actually higher than they were prior to this
And that's
flooding.
it very well could be. It's something we haven't been able to quantify because I don't think we had base prior to the flood data on the elevation of those ridges and if they changed during the event or not.
But I think this is something we've got to start keenly, just like we have been for our roads, doing some trail maintenance. And I would actually suggest we cut back, $208,000 from road work so that we can,
Oh, absolutely not.
We can't do that.
Absolutely not.
Probably not gonna fly.
then where are you going to get it? We need to do this. This is
You
the
don't
same.
need to do it. I run or ride on that trail almost every day during the summer. I know that there are pipes there, and I avoid them. I'm sorry that there was an accident out there, right? But the trails are what the trails are. We don't have an unlimited source of funds. So you have $200,000.
So why are we doing extremely expensive
So make a
chip
suggestion
sealing?
about how you want to fund that out of what's here. I think from everybody's perspective is that roads are off limits. We want to spend at least $2 million on roads.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, that's clearly your
We
prerogative.
have made
but
a
I think
huge
the-
improvement in roads, and we need to start keeping our other things up to date. Our citizens,
I
this
think
would be
there's
cutting.
There's probably still another 10 years of this level of road work that needs to be done.
So we're
40
gonna let
years.
all our parks and
Not
trails go downhill?
I'm not saying that. I'm suggesting that
Yes,
if you
you
want,
are.
you are prioritizing this,
Mark,
make
we have been
suggestions
cutting,
that take 200,000 away from something else.
we have been cutting CLC and park budgets consistently since at least 2010 on the capital funding. We're going backwards.
I would like to say I need potholes filled.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I have potholes to be filled, so that's my comment. I'm for parks, but we have a lot of potholes.
I'm sympathetic to what Susan is saying. but also I'm measuring the volume of the issue. I don't know how many bikes and pedestrians walk down the trails, and I hope it grows as time goes on. But there's tens and tens of thousands of cars and trucks and things that are frustrating the issue up and down our roads at the same time. So if we have to fix one, I have to say, we need to be fixing the roads. I'm sorry. As much as I would like to see all of our trails look like, not gonna happen.
Mark, I have a question for Matt. Matt, you mentioned that, and you showed this today, that there are 2 areas which get wet, and I fully agree with you. Is it possible to fix those 2 areas with problems? And that would be, very small amount, maybe a couple of $100, so.
I would say that they're likely more than a couple $100.
Okay, whatever, small amount. You're not talking about,
The challenge we have, Gurdeep, is that within our public land staff, we don't have the capability of doing that. There's been times where we've been able to rely on the streets crew to pave some small sections, but the streets crew is the first to say that these are temporary fixes because they don't put asphalt down every day. I watched Payne and Dolan put asphalt down in Lakeview Park today. Those guys do it every day. They're very good at what they do. They know what they do. I'm not saying that we couldn't make some repairs, provided that Sean and Brad are amenable to working with us to do that next year in those areas. But I know that the first thing that Dean, the street superintendent, is going to say is they're temporary. We're not going to validate our work for the long haul.
and that's fine. And Sean, you think that you could help out with these 2 areas next year?
So I think there's 2 issues, right? What you're suggesting is probably very temporary, which is just to pave a ramp over top of the pipe, right?
Well,
Or have the pipe lowered.
we probably would have to lower the pipes and then patch the asphalt
Right.
and assess back to the pipe owner the costs of lowering their pipes if they
I wouldn't
won't
even
do
go
it.
that far, because if you're gonna make it temporary, all you're really trying to do is just ramp up the pavement on either side. Right, and that's all
It
that
depends
needs.
how temporary we're looking. That could be done.
So here's the thing, and this might be the solution for you, Susan, is that next year is the last year for EAB, right, which is $160,000 in the public lands budget, which goes away in 2020, right? And if we continue to fund at consistent levels, that's 160 grand that can be put forward to trails in the
Or at least
2020 plans, right? And it doesn't impact roads. So I think that's really the course of action, is if it takes 2 or 3 or 5 grand worth of asphalt to ramp over top of those pipes for 2 years or a year and a half or 2, whatever it is, that's a much better solution than trying to take $200,000 out of roads for next year. It can wait until 2020 to do it right.
And I think I agree with Mark. He has a great idea here, so.
Yeah, but the thing is, we can't, we're promising things for 2020, unfortunately, here. And there's no guarantee we will follow through, and I've got real doubts about that.
Welcome to government budgeting.
And that's why I think
But-
some of
but-
these
So
things,
here's the thing, and you know this as well, is that next spring, there's gonna be there's possibility that there could be 4 new members of this council. And in the following spring, there could be 4 additional new members
yes,
of council.
that's what I'm very aware of.
So
That's why I'm concerned.
That's one of the reasons why the precedent is that you don't encumber future councils with decisions now.
That's why I'm concerned about this approach.
Okay, but the reality is that we have an overwhelming majority of people, I think, on this council that prefer roads to trails, or at least fixing the roads that we have to trails. That's the political reality, is that we've made a commitment to our constituents that for the past, 5 or 6 years, that we would seriously start fixing the roads in the city. And we've done a tremendous job. We've taken
That's why
road construction up from about $1.1 million to $2 million
We've
bucks.
doubled it. That's
plus
why I'm
whatever TIF expenses there are on top of that.
That's why I am concerned about the fact that we have been cutting and
But we haven't been
public
cutting.
lands.
We haven't been cutting because we've taken the capital budget from $2 million a year to 3.5.
Mark, we used to, when I first got on CLC, our capital budgets were in the $300,000 and $400,000 range.
The public lands budget as a
For
proposed.
CLC.
The public, okay, even for CLC, you've got 300, well, okay. For
No, we
public
don't.
lands, it's 330. For CLC, it's 130. I mean,
Yeah, well, that's going
But
down in half.
that has nothing to do with trails.
I'm talking about we are cutting back already on our Conservancy lands capital spending. And we need to start rethinking it. We finally just got back the LTEs that got cut a long time ago.
So could we actually have a table rather than just saying for the past 4 or 5 years how the budget was for CLC? I mean, it's one thing to say, quite another to prove it.
I would make a motion that we reduce the Public Works budget to 1.9 million. Unfortunately, Middleton Beach Road isn't on this budget.
No, it's, 4 years out, yeah. But there's other things.
Second for you.
Is there a second? Okay, there's no second. Let's move on. Motion fails.
Question for Sean. Hey, Sean, real quick. Some asphalt over the top of those pipes that are just.
Well, they may continue to move. I don't know what they're bedded in. I haven't seen them.
Not much, it's swamp.
Swamp, no.
Right. So, but we can take a look at it and see what we can do relatively cheaply in a pretty isolated area. It doesn't help the whole path, but it could help the really dangerous area.
I think there's what, 2 or 3 pipes?
I think there's a set of 2 pipes. There might be a different area, a little bit remote from them. That's a different pipe. And then there are a couple of areas that are identified as kind of slick spots where I think there's some bacteria growth on the surface of the asphalt because of
Constant water draining.
water that drains over the path instead of under it. Yeah.
Well, we're not proposing that you fix that.
We can't very well
So the-
fix that.
Solution to that is to figure out another way to get that water to drain into Confluence Pond.
Probably.
Not over top of the path.
Yeah. No.
So, $5,000 worth of asphalt? Is that what
Uh,
is that what we're hearing?
I haven't measured it up or priced it out, but it's probably in that range, I would say.
So you could measure it and bring it back at the next. city
Well,
council?
you could budget it. I don't do that.
No,
What's the
you could at
total,
least
Bill?
make some estimate
Bill,
and
what's the total?
then come back.
Oh, a budget estimate. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Being 2,000.
We're at 3,489 right now.
How much?
3,489,000.
So is there a motion to add that repair to those trails?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second for that? So what are you gonna put in there? Is it 10
10.
grand? 10 grand? How did we get from, we're at 3489, okay, so now we're at 3499?
If we added 10,
Wait a minute,
Took away 32 in the poll book and added 30 in on there.
Got it.
so we got
Okay.
2 that way.
so 10 grand
The
for,
motion's to add 10,000 for those repairs.
yes.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Aye.
2-2. So
Any other trading, horse trading? Any other wheeling and dealing somebody in finance wants to do? So we're at,
Your motion, you hadn't made a motion on it.
Yeah, Susan, you haven't made a motion.
Didn't get a second.
No, that was for the trails. You didn't do anything about the Middleton restoration and the master plan.
It didn't get second either, so.
Oh, Middleton, right. Okay, I would move, even though I'm not happy with doing it, the Conservancy Plan, Master Plan needs to be done. So I would suggest we switch out those two. And hopefully this committee or this council will fund the Middleton Hills restoration for 2020. It's almost at the end of needing the restoration work and will just become maintenance work.
So the motion is to swap numbers 2 and 6,
Yes.
Conservancy Lands, Public Capital Projects.
I'll second.
or any discussion? I'll just comment that, you know, at some point, you gotta stop playing, you just gotta start doing stuff. The restoration should get done. But that's fine. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Aye. Any other wheeling and dealing?
Chief Falk wanted simulcast, or there was an item that you wanted this morning.
That's not-
Well, everything I had on the capital budget list was legitimate. I understand the constraints that you guys face. I don't have a trade-off for that, so I guess I have to say, not very happily, that I will accept what you guys have done.
Do at least explain to us the need for the simulcast?
Well, I explained it, you know, in the capital budget presentation, but it enhances our police radio system. We're having difficulties with penetration with the new Danecom radio system, especially in underground parking garages and modern buildings, thick buildings. So this would enhance that, but we have workarounds, and we'll put it on next year's capital budget.
Okay, so this is new, so we wouldn't have had it for the shooting.
No, but it would have made
It would have
communication
made
better.
it much
Yep,
easier.
Yep. But, I mean,
Including
they've.
from the EOC.
Yes, yeah, we have trouble getting out of our own EOC. But, you know, I understand how they crafted this, and we've discussed it this morning, and while I had a couple of ideas of perhaps trading some things off and maybe putting some things in my operating budget, it was just a waste of money, frankly, and I'll live with this. But thanks for asking.
Anything else? Is there a motion to accept as it is?
I'll make that motion.
Second? I'll second.
Howard, is there something you wanna, that's not in here that you're looking for?
No,
Okay,
fine.
okay,
What's the number we're at
To
now?
me, this is not the time to sit and horse trade on.
We're still at
okay.
Okay, so the
I could have
recommend,
done that.
10,000 under the target,
10 or 11?
so the
10.4.
motion is to accept.
as
Have you
modified.
updated, Bill, has this been updated now? I thought the numbers.
Yeah, we're at
Yes, no,
10.4,
Yeah, I thought-
10,400 under the cap
I
that
thought
you
the
had set.
motion for the repair was a 2-2 vote, so it failed. Did I have that wrong?
That's correct.
That's right,
It
yeah.
did fail. So
Yeah,
that's, it's
that's
the
right.
3489 is the right number?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to approve this capital budget as
Recommended to council, right?
recommended here,
Mhm.
right now. So is there any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Aye.
3-1. So we're on to planning. We need a motion to get us started. So is there a motion to approve
I'll move we approve as recommended by the staff.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? So I'll start. Again, as we talked about this when we considered these plans, the $1.4 million for the trail connector is recreational use for a TIF fund doesn't have any increment. And it seems to me that getting the cart before the horse, when we start spending here for recreational infrastructure, when there's no when essentially there's no increment to spend money on. So I would ask, and I'll make the motion, that we remove this project until such time as there's sufficient increment to pay for it. There's a second. Okay. Any other discussion? I'll just, okay, I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox. At some point, everyone here needs to understand that we can't spend money that we don't have. And that applies not only to capital, but operating. And you guys gotta get it into your head, right, that we need to start living within our means. And that's all I'm gonna say about this. Is there any other discussion about the planning budget?
Yeah,
Howard, I mean, Gurdeep?
Yeah, I just would like to say that for this item, Northeast Trail Corridor, we need a realistic number, and 1.4 is not, because you can look at this Maywood 735 for the whole road, reconstruction and everything, so maybe not today, but, we need something which is more realistic. I talked to Dan, and he told me that you can get bridges more like for, whatever the number was, much cheaper.
Don't use me to put this plan down.
No, I'm not putting it down. I'm saying that we just need the realistic number, so.
There's a lot of very different things involved in this plan, some of which is land acquisition, which you don't have to do on Maywood.
Is there any other discussion on,
Now I have to
ask the question, let's go.
guy standing up.
I'm sorry, what was your question? I'll do my best.
Maybe we can split this in.
So the question is,
The number, the 1.412 is just a,
it is much higher than any of us in this room would like it to be. There's no question about that. I did speak with our engineering consultant today doing the design work, asking if they had any updated numbers based on their survey work that they completed in the past month and a half. Their concern is that we might need even more retaining walls than we previously thought. So if anything, they don't see, they think this is still a good number. The intent is to budget very conservatively. We would all much rather have it be a lower number. I am hopeful that the real estate number will be lower if we have cooperative property owners along the corridor, which we are, after talking with Alder Ramsey and my own conversations with property owners, we're hopeful that there will be some cooperation that might reduce those real estate costs. Matt Amundsen has indicated that they use, is it $90 a lineal foot for paving, which for segment, for the west segment, Concept B, which I just handed out to you, that path estimate, including asphalt and base, is $610,000. So $90 a lineal foot times 4,500 feet would be $405,000. But what that number that Matt has given me doesn't include is when you cross driveways and when you have ramps and modifications to other things that happen that aren't just trail related or asphalt paving related. So that path estimate seems to make sense to us at the staff level, the $610,000. The structure estimate for a bridge and retaining walls, like I said, that number may end up having to go up a little bit. We certainly hope not.
Mark, also a point on that when the mayor's comparing repaving a road. We don't have to build all those bridges, retaining walls, et cetera.
It's
a road.
it's a rebuilding, not it's not paving, it's with water and sewer and all of that stuff, not just, it's a
So this is
rebuilding.
the best number we have at the moment. We did try to pinpoint the number a little bit more, but
Well, it's not just pave.
Mark, maybe I didn't phrase the question right.
Okay.
Is there a way that this cost for this, whatever it happens to be, and I'm not questioning the cost or the idea, could this be done, phased to
in more segments.
a number of years, so that we didn't have to look at such a, try to deal with it in 1 year?
Sure. Yeah, I don't see any reason why it couldn't be segmented further. The reason why we picked the west segment as the top priority is because that is the segment in the city between Highland Avenue and Century Avenue where there's no parallel route that's asphalt, or that's paved. So that is, in my view, the most pressing segment in the city because the northeast side of the city is only connected via Century Avenue, via an all-season route. If the council wishes to segment it further to reduce the chunk of the segment that is constructed, reduce expenses, obviously that's within your discretion. Right now, we're designing the entire corridor to.
But I'm not talking about getting rid of anything. I'm talking
No, I understand.
phases.
No, I understand.
Over the next 2, 3, 4 years to accomplish the same thing as you're trying to buy in 1 year.
Maybe Sean or Matt can speak to this, but I would imagine that every time you segment, you have mobilization costs, things like that you do have to, yeah, so.
1.4 million is a pretty large.
It's,
There's also an issue that I've got a concern with. We're bringing adults and children down from Highland Way. The sort of logical place would be where this trail would then go into the Conservancy. But that just dumps all those people into probably the most dangerous part.
Century and Allen, yeah.
Mark, does the figure include land acquisition or not?
In this, yeah.
I don't-
Sorry, I only made 9 copies. I should have
So
made a few more.
Dan could speak to this, I believe, because,
I just mentioned it.
okay.
I mentioned that we're optimistic that there will be partnerships with the neighbors in exchange for the city taking on maintenance. I didn't go into great detail,
Thanks.
but we're optimistic that there will be some savings there.
But Dan's actually talked to the property.
I can speak to District 7. And in District 7, there are where they have to go that would have the most impact, and where we don't have previous agreements. There are, a number of the neighbors are very interested in helping this project along.
Anything from District 6?
Well, in District 6, I think that's where it would go behind in the Conservancy,
Most likely.
most likely, which could be put off, but we still have the problem of basically taking all these people from the northeast side and dumping them onto a very narrow sidewalk at an incredibly busy,
But there's no,
Great.
in that part, there's no land cost, so that's conservancy land, so.
right. But what I'm saying is if we put off the Conservancy lands part, yes, it'll reduce the cost some, but it's not making a safe trail.
No, we're talking about the cost of the land right now, so if there's a.
No, I thought we were talking about the whole thing.
Segmented. Mr. Teal.
Think this could be done in a couple, 2, 3, 4 phases?
I think 4 phases is getting out there.
3? I don't know. Phasing it.
I would question, as Mark has brought up,
I'm good.
do that, if we phase it, how much more is it gonna cost us to do the project if we phase it?
Well, yeah, if I may, one of the reasons also I forgot to mention why the cost is perhaps a bit higher than we would expect otherwise is it's a very narrow area that they're working in, and they've got a very busy road next to them. So Sean probably can speak to how mobilization occurs when you have a lot of traffic actively next to you. Unless you close a lane, which probably isn't too feasible on Century, it certainly wouldn't be popular with the traveling public. There are constraints, and so there's probably some additional costs associated with that. So to do that over multiple years starts creating, once you create an impact over multiple years, it's more noticeable. If you do it just all once, or at least one segment, west segment, it's probably less pain.
Have you thought of applying for some grants?
Yeah, we, as you know, applied a couple of years ago. I prepared the application for the Transportation Alternatives Program grant, which we then were advised by several consultants, two consultants, to return. That was only for $268,000. At the time, that estimate, that grant award was based on a very preliminary staff level estimate, which obviously ended up being far too low, regrettably. Incidentally, just so everyone knows, the county had also applied for a TAP grant that year and also turned the money back for the same reason that we did. So we aren't, I learned that later on, we aren't the only ones that were concerned about adhering to the federal grant requirements. With all the I-dotting and T-crossing that was required, it wasn't worth it. But that said, I'm optimistic that with the county's emphasis on the North Mendota corridor, the Highway M corridor, with a path along Highway M, which they have accelerated that planning to our surprise a year ago. They are doing design work now. They obviously are emphasizing bike transportation alongside that corridor, so I'm very optimistic that we could apply for a county parks grant. And I would like to be able to do that, certainly for latter phases. There's a good chance that with the timing of the county's project that we will dovetail with them very nicely, and maybe we can achieve some economies of scale, hopefully. And by the way, KL Engineering, our engineering consultant, one of the reasons I recommended we hire them, aside from that they had a good price, they are also doing the design work for the county's portion. So we're really trying to maximize efficiency.
Mr. Chair,
I have a couple questions. Bill, you might just put out the pro formas for TIF 5. Is the $1.4 million embedded in your expenses?
Yeah, so this includes the 1.4 million for the Northeast Trail Connector project in 2019. And it's showing that we would have anticipated that using the advanced funds that have already been advanced, that we would have about $630,000 that we would be in a deficit at the end of 2019. So that would either mean an additional advance or borrowing of some sort if the cost came in at the full 1.4 million. So that's why we wanted to hand this out, to make the committee aware of that projection.
So, just to be prudent, I would argue that you really shouldn't do any of this until 2026, right, when there's available fund balance. Right, again, I keep talking about not spending money we don't have. Right, so, again, this trail is not building increment for TIF 5, is it? Can someone tell me that if I build this trail, that somehow, somewhere, that the increment is gonna increase over some lifespan?
no one can tell you that.
So what we were saying is that this is pure expense. It does not build increment. And again, I will reiterate that we are spending money that we do not have in TIF 5. That, to me, it should be a showstopper, right? It would be one thing if we were saying, I'll give a developer or a property owner $1.4 million to build something and to build increment, but we're not.
Neither does
Just,
the
if we could-
bicycle B-share thing either.
Pardon me?
The bicycle bike sharing system doesn't build increment.
And I agree that we should not fund that,
I don't think that should be here.
right? We have a duty to our citizens to make these things solvent. And if we're not building increment, then we shouldn't have the TIF funds. the whole premise of this is to say, let's segregate these properties, build increments so that we can spur investment and more property value. If we're not doing that, then we shouldn't have the TIFs.
Art, if I may, for TID 3, we borrowed for the first about 15 years. It's just actually longer than that, almost 20 years. We borrowed funds to get TID 3 going. It took a long time to get it going and to get a positive cash flow. We've done that in the last 5 or so years where we've had large balances in TID 3. We didn't just start off having the money through a few projects.
But you didn't build a bike trail in TIF 3. What you did was you build roadways and you build sewer systems so that the property that was in TID 3 was available for development and people could come in and develop that property, and it would help that wave build. Okay? This is not a sewer system. This is not a roadway. It's a recreational device.
And I'm
it
not disagreeing with that part. I'm just saying from an investment standpoint, we did invest in infrastructure, and we saw private development follow that infrastructure. To some extent, that would be the case with commuter trails as well, but I would agree with you, largely not as much.
If I can comment, I would point out that bicyclists and pedestrians have equal right to the road system, and a lot of them don't feel safe walking along Century Avenue. So if the city has used TIF funding for our transportation network, this is not just about recreation, this is about transportation for a lot of people. That would be my observation. So where do you draw that line between what's recreation and what's transportation? There's people who go out in their convertibles on Sundays for joyrides on the roads too. So I mean, there are people who recreate on the roads as they use it for transportation. So, you know, our transit system doesn't sustain itself either. So I guess we're trying to, at the staff level, trying to come up with a funding approach that we feel is legally justified to support our quality of life and economic development in the city. And this is spending, the TIF funding would only be available within, for the west segment anyway, because it's within our buffer for where we can spend. It's a half mile, right? Is it a mile? It's half mile. Half mile. So absent this, it would be funded through capital funding, capital borrowing, or strictly through grants. We are still going to apply for grants as much as possible. Matt pointed out another option potentially, which is the recreational trails program through stewardship. The problem with these grants is we need to have the design in place. In the case of this grant and the county grant, we need to actually have the design in place in order to, and be ready to go in order to qualify for the grant.
This is more than a recreation trail. This is a transportation trail. And I know several Middleton citizens that bike every day of the year into the university, the same as people drive or take the bus. It is a transportation system.
So
Now, I would
we can
suggest
have a
we-
discussion about what's the priority, whether it's road or bike trails. But we shouldn't have that during the budget process. We should have that during some other off-season, right? The reality is that the entire city is built on roads. Or the majority of our constituents are saying that where we should be spending our money is on roads. ROADS, not bike trails. So maybe that's a topic that we can have for a council of the whole as to how to apportion the money that's available for transportation between those two.
Well, let's get to the council, right? There's no motion pending other than the acceptance of the whole thing. So either let's vote up or down, and then let's move to the council agenda.
Can I make a motion to delete the bike sharing system?
Sure.
It's from TID 3, not from 5.
Right.
I would second that. Is there any discussion on that one?
Just a comment, tourism is still actively considering funding the operating portion of that. They had a meeting Tuesday. Is Julie here? Yeah.
We did have quite a lengthy discussion about this last night, and at the end of the day, the Tourism Commission approved $50,000 per year over a 3-year period for sponsorship and marketing of the program. It's contingent upon B-Cycle giving us the sponsorships at the $150 level, as presented to us, at $50,000. So there's still some discussion that we need to have with B-Cycle.
And what's the total annual operating cost?
The total annual, I think, was 105 and change, 105.
This is only-
So a little bit short of a half is what we agreed to. Yeah, and B-Cycle, I believe, would be working on creating other sponsorships that could be offered to the community. So essentially, we would be jump-starting the program.
I see the Northeast Trail Connector more important.
So there's a motion to delete it. Second, is there any other discussion on this? All those in favor of deleting the bike sharing program signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
3-1 passes, so the bike sharing is out. Is there any other discussion?
So the Northeast Middleton Trail Connector
It's still in there.
is still there.
Somebody wants to make another motion.
I was hoping that Mark would not give me the answer he gave me. And I understand that it costs more over years to do something like that. But as much as I am a bicyclist as well, that's a chunk of change for
4,500 feet.
I'm not saying it's not a worthwhile project, it's just that it's the wrong time.
One other number that we just recently got, as of last Friday, was for the downtown plaza development. And the recommendation from the Plaza Committee was for an option called the Nest, with an estimate of approximately $1.55 million. So we hadn't filled that in yet, but wanted to make you aware of that.
Where is that? That's not on here, right?
That's
Number 3, under planning.
It's listed as a to-be-determined.
Oh,
dollar
TBT?
amount.
Oh,
The-
yeah, I was reading that the other day. I saw that, the Nest.
1.5.
1.5?
55.
I have a question. Mark, do you know how much the grants could potentially be for that Northeast Trail Connector? The question. No, to you. Do you have any idea what the grants could potentially be for the connector?
I do not. Matt, do you happen to know what you don't know the cap either for the rec program or for county parks?
Both of those programs, specifically the DNR one, is based on competition. How many other projects are submitted and where it ranks. So the awards could be large, it just depends on where it ranks. The county one is dependent on, is the county grant program funded? And then similarly, how many projects are submitted and where the rank is. So there's a great variance in what you can ask for, but it also is very dependent on who else is asking for money and where the projects rank.
And the county's budget is pretty small. I don't remember the amount, but I remember it being, was it $500,000 or $1 million? It's not, our project would take all the funding and then some.
Is there a motion you wanted to make, Howard, or was it just a point of discussion?
Yeah, I would be glad to make a motion to delete the project.
Which project?
Northeast Trail Connector.
To point of order, I made that motion and it failed for lack of a second. Is it acceptable to remove?
Yep.
Then I'll second it. So we we have a motion to remove and a second to remove. Is there any other discussion on that one?
Roll call vote.
Just the four of us.
Yeah, well, we all speak same time. You never know what's gonna
He
happen.
likes
Pizza gets to you, it may be different.
No belches on yes, is that what you're asking?
Great.
All those in favor of removing million four signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No?
Aye.
2. Do you still need a roll call vote? All right, so it's unfortunate, it's still in. Pardon me?
Invited at
It
council.
fails, it's still on the list.
Yes. So, the TIF plan is still,
Deleted the
did we,
Bike
did we
sharing.
get the bike share out, or is that still in?
No, you voted
Bike share,
that
that's
3-1
ours.
out.
A 3-1 vote.
So it's 3-9 what? Did you update that? 3994, okay. All right,
Add
so
in the
that's what's
TBD.
left. Is there any other discussion about the TIF planning?
Plaza has added on to that, though.
It's not.
The I guess the question is, do we want to add a specific dollar amount for the plaza at this point, now that we have an estimate? When we put the budget together, we added as to be determined, thinking we could revisit that when we have the number.
I think maybe we should have an explanation of what that number is before we vote to include it, or,
I think we could do that.
Are we
I mean,
limited?
It's
I
a
mean,
TIF,
there-
so it won't affect the levy, so I think we could amend the
Yeah.
budget to put a number in the future if we want to.
I think we should probably have an explanation of what the proposals are and before we get down that road, so. Unless there's somebody that wants to add a placeholder. Okay.
So what happens, yeah, and then don't we have like a whole fundraising campaign and there's a donation approach? So 1.5 is what it would cost if we went today to a capital, but that might not be the cost of the program. So how do you back out those dollars once you've committed them in capital?
Well, what we had talked about, and the council approved naming rights policy for, to be explicit for the plaza, is to take out components that could be fundraised from donors. And so that would be a next step, once we got a little bit further along in defining those numbers.
Mike, does it have to be specific components or just simply donors to the overall cost of it?
The naming rights is for components, so that's what we
The
agreed
naming
to.
rights, but can't we get donations for
Yes,
just the plaza in
Yes.
general too?
you could do both. Absolutely.
So I'm not hearing that anybody's interested in putting a placeholder in there, so is there a motion to proceed with the 3994?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Or any other discussion? So it's a motion to approve 3994 to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Aye.
So there's no recommendation to council?
Great.
Let the council talk.
Okay. That was a waste of an hour.
Well,
Well, we got to hear it.
Except that the members had the benefit of our intellectual largesse, I guess.
That's a generous word, yeah.
Is there a motion to adjourn finance?
Oh.
Second.
We are adjourned.